don't forget why you do it. Don't forget that you're doing it because it's fun, because it makes you happy, and because you love it.
So we're here today with Xylo Aria. Can I call you Xylo? Is that okay?
Yes, perfect.
So we're in Shoreditch, London, in the Novation pop-up shop. Thanks guys for letting me film here. I'm trying to explore the creative process with other creators. So I'd like to explore your creative process, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Can you introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm Xylo Aria. I'm a singer, songwriter and producer. I was born in India, but I grew up most of my life in Australia, and then I moved to London about a couple of years ago. I started off just singing really, and then production is a very new thing for me just in the last kind of 3 years. And I think I naturally bring a lot of Indian influence to my music in combination with a lot of Western elements to it to make this experimental, down-tempo, ambient kind of music.
Okay. As you mentioned, you're a singer-songwriter, but also a producer. So that means you create your music, you record it and stuff?
I started releasing my own music kind of 2 years ago, stuff that I'd produced myself, and sometimes it gets a bit tiring, and I do like to work in collaborations here and there because it keeps it fresh and stuff, but it's just kind of easier to work on your own sometimes.
You think so?
Not always. It can be a struggle. Actually, I do miss working with others in the sense that having people to bounce ideas off is something that's really nice and something that I do really miss working on my own.
So how did you get into home recording? I assume you have a home studio setup.
Yes, I do. To be honest, I never really thought I was going to get into production. It was just working with other producers for me was good, but also very frustrating a process.
Really?
For many reasons. And like, I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I need to have control of my own music, and I never want to be in a position again where I feel like without having another producer, I can't express my music. The only answer to that was learning to produce on my own. And I kind of got started, and it was a bit of a crazy process. I just didn't know where to start. But things slowly start falling into place, and I had some people to help me through that. I started just with a laptop and like a USB microphone and Ableton. So that was my setup for a long time. And slowly I've grown that to have like monitors and MIDI controllers and interfaces and bits and pieces. So
that's kind of a light setup. Did you feel limited at the time?
Honestly, no, because firstly, I didn't know what it felt like to have a bunch of things. And sometimes I feel like the ideas I came up with in that time were even more creative than what I've come up with recently. And that's the thing about having limitations, you know. Sometimes I feel like if you limit yourself to very few elements, you're forced to be more creative. Whereas if you've got everything at your fingertips, and some people have like massive like gigs and gigs of libraries of sounds, and then they just don't know what to do with them. So I don't think limitation is a bad thing.
How do you limit yourself?
Now, I don't really think about it. Actually, the only way I do that really is time limits recently. So if I'm working on something and I tell myself it needs to be done by a certain time, which is another kind of limitation. And sometimes it works well when you can keep yourself accountable, but sometimes it doesn't. But yeah.
The time limit is probably the most interesting one, because as artists, as creators, you always want things to be perfect. So you push it a little bit further, it can be a little bit better, you know? And at some point you have to say stop because it's good enough. It's probably never going to be perfect anyway. And you just feel, I know that when I do that, I feel miserable.
Definitely.
Shit, it should be better, but it's already good.
Yeah.
Right?
And the thing is, when we think it should be better, it's like, what exactly are we comparing to? You know, sometimes I feel like I've gone into that loop of like, this needs to be better and better and better. And then when I listen back to the first demo or whatever, there's some like magic in there of that first recording when you're really excited about it. That's just kind of been lost over this perfection, you know, journey. So sometimes I feel like it's an insecurity thing, you know, where like we don't want to put it out yet because it could be better or this could happen or that could happen or whatever. But in the process, we're kind of sometimes getting further and further away from that initial spark. So it can be a double-edged sword, perfection.
How do you start working on a song? What's the first thing you do generally?
I wouldn't say I have like a set process that I go through every time. I think one of the last songs I wrote was just me like sitting in bed with a pen and paper and just kind of coming up with a melody and some lyrics of something that I wanted to talk about. And then once I had that structure and everything, then I went into the production software and started arranging everything and recording everything. I think it makes the production a bit easier because you have a structure already. Sometimes when I start with the production, I get stuck after like, you know, a minute and a half because I've just kind of run out of ideas, and then it's a matter of pushing through that. When I've written a song, I try and make sure I've got at least 2 verses and 2 choruses kind of thing. When I go into the production, I know that I've already got material for like, you know, almost a full song. Whereas when I'm just starting with the production, sometimes I'll have 2 different elements, which might be like a verse and a chorus. And then I feel like I've run out of ideas to keep it interesting for the whole song. It's just a matter of pushing through that. Like a couple of tracks recently, which I left at that kind of 60% mark. I just pushed back and gave myself a time limit and said like it needs to be done by a certain time. And then having that limit has just made me finish the track.
If I don't have all the lyrics and words, if I start producing the rest, the music, I get stuck in some sort of loop and I can't go past that.
I think lyric writing is still the most challenging thing for me. I really like melodies and like coming up with different melodies, but often I'll just come up with a melody and then just talk some gibberish over it and try and fit words in there. I find that really hard because I don't know exactly what I want the topic of the song to be, but I know what I want it to sound like.
Talking about sound, when you start recording stuff, how do you find sounds? How do you define the sound of the track?
I don't know really. I mean, I don't know if I really thought about it that much. There's a few plugins that I really like. For example, Massive. I love Massive, and some of the Ableton stock plugins are quite good, I think. And I do like really manipulating sounds and just weird samples that I've found and using like the warp function that Ableton has, just turning them into something totally different.
There's one thing that's consistent though in your sound. It's the effects you put on your voice. Kind of a double sound, I think.
Lately, I've just been layering vocals a lot. I'll have like 7 tracks of vocals going. So there'll be like the main vocal, another vocal like hard left, another vocal panned hard right, and then another one like me really far from the mic, another one me like really close to the mic but singing softly, another like whisper track. So there's heaps of vocals creating that main sound. So it might sound like a doubler or something, but it's just literally a lot of takes.
Okay.
And to try and keep that clarity, I try and keep the main just clean and then have another second bus which has like the effects coming through a little bit less intensely than the main. So I guess I do have a way to treat my vocals in all the tracks.
I got you there.
Yeah.
You're a one-woman band.
Yeah.
So you record a lot of stuff. Your tracks are quite complex sometimes. You've got a lot of layers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do you do when you perform? Because you're still like on your own. How
Yeah.
does that work?
This was a big question for me when I started. Like, how am I going to set up my live show? And there's so many options. You know, you can get like a Roland SPD, play some drums, or like get some synths and then not have that plugged into your laptop at all. Or do you want the laptop on stage? Do you not? And how many things can go wrong and how do you minimize that? So I was like, let's not get too overwhelmed. And then I just got a Novation Launch Key 49, which I still use. I thought I was keeping it simple, but I had like each octave was a different sound. I was playing this thing that I'd made and then I recorded myself. And it was just a mess. Like, it was, you could see in my face, I was just so stressed of like, oh, what's here, what's there? And like, you know, pressing different things. And you know, my main thing is being a vocalist and I'd lost attention in that and it wouldn't engage an audience. And then I like simplified it a lot. So like now I trigger scenes through Ableton and I play one synth at a time. So I might have 2 or 3 over the song, but it's not too complex. And then that way I can really focus on the vocal and engaging with the audience.
I've seen you perform. It's quite interesting. You move a lot. You dance sometimes.
Yeah.
So when you have a setup like that, it can be a little bit hard to not, bump into things and stuff like that. What's the thing you find to be the hardest part of your creative process?
I think it's finding the motivation to like push through to complete tracks. And I think finishing tracks is just everyone's challenge. Because the most fun part is, I think, the start, when you come up with the idea and you're really excited about it. I'm like, oh, this is so fun. And then I'll get to a stage where the fun is wearing off, but I haven't finished the track yet. And then going back to something that you've started is not as fun as starting something new. I recently heard a talk by Georgia. She's an amazing artist, and she was saying that she finishes everything she makes, whether it's good or bad or whatever it is. I think it's a good habit to get into, because then when you get something good, you'll make sure you finish it.
I agree so much with you. It is very hard to finish things.
Yeah.
And it's some kind of paradox, because once you finish something and you, let's say, publish it, it's the best feeling in the world, like just having completed something. So I don't know why we do this to ourselves, really. It's
I don't know.
And so before I felt like I was on my own, and then I realized that every artist was going through this.
Everyone, yeah.
What's the easiest thing in your creative process?
The easiest thing, and what I really enjoy doing, is like creating atmosphere with my voice. In a lot of the tracks that I make, there's some sort of like vocal loop that goes through the song. I love that because that's my instrument, it's what I feel most comfortable with. So more than writing a bass line or like programming a synth or something, if I can do that with my voice, then I would do that and turn it into a synth or something like that, because I have full control of it and I know how to use it.
It's a free instrument, your voice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I've seen you perform, and so sometimes you have fully produced tracks, and sometimes you go a cappella. What's that about?
I grew up with traditional Indian music, so my grandma learnt Indian Carnatic music, and it's something that has always fascinated me. And so I started learning that not too long ago as well, and I love it, and it feels like such a big part of who I am that I really want to share it with the audience. So when I have a gig or whatever, in the middle I'll slot in a couple of these little pieces. And Carnatic music is very vocal centric, like the voice is the main element always. I feel like a cappella is the best way to represent that.
You're kind of naked when you do that, though. How does it feel like?
It feels the easiest actually of everything else, because there's nothing else to think about for me, and I'm that confident in my voice, especially singing Carnatic music. Somehow I feel like it's more of who I am than singing my own music, which is weird, just because it's the first thing I ever sang, you know.
Sometimes you get stuck.
Yeah.
How do you get unstuck?
Sometimes I really try and push through it that day, because I'm like, I need to get this idea done, because I know if I leave it, I just won't come back to it. Just try bringing in new elements that don't really fit in the original thing, just to see what comes out.
When I'm stuck, I get out. I go grab a coffee, I sit in the coffee shops, I take the train, I look at people, like, look at life. It's a little bit weird.
No,
I'm not a stalker, okay?
You know what? I started reading this book called Writing Better Lyrics, and it was saying, if you do get stuck, go and just like people watch, and then like create stories behind people that you see on the street. And I was like, that's so interesting. Like, it can really inspire you. And so I think that's a great idea. I should try it.
What would you need to improve your workflow? If you could like snap your fingers and get magically something.
I think it would be more discipline, I think. Yeah, like I've joined a few writing challenges, things like a beat every week or something like that. But I just, you know, I get busy and then that falls not in the priority section of what I need to do. And yeah, if I could do anything, it would be like more discipline to keep writing and be disciplined to finish things. So 2 major things. Yeah.
So you don't feel limited by
gear.
Technical stuff or gear?
Not at all. I got offered to like be given more gear from, you know, to try a few things, but I was like, it's too much, like I don't need it, and it's going to be more overwhelming for me than anything else. So
I can take it if you don't want it. It's fine. I have time.
I'll let you know when I get an offer next time.
I agree with you. It's not really about gear. A lot of people ask, like, you know, what plugins do I need? Like, do I need this fancy microphone? Not really.
Again, limitations, you know. Yeah, I'd rather have some stock plugins or something that you know how to use well than like 100 new like fancy plugins that you don't know what you're doing with.
How is it like to be a woman creating music and performing? I think we don't see enough women producing.
When you think of the typical producer, it's, you know, it's definitely not a woman, and you kind of feel like you're not the right person for this job or for this part of music. So I think a lot of it is about working through that yourself and kind of feeling more confident to be able to ask questions and stuff. So when I started, there were a lot of different forums and things I was going to, and I was one of the very few girls in the room. And then when people asked, you know, if I have any questions, like I was just thinking, I have so many that I want to ask, but I don't want to be that person that doesn't really know what they're doing and that kind of thing. So then I just stayed silent. But now I think just because I'm more confident in what I'm doing, like I would ask, because it's probably not a stupid question. I'm sure there's other people in the room that wanting to ask the same thing. As a woman, you help other women as well that might be a bit unsure, and just show them that like it's okay. If I can do it, you probably can too. So yeah, so I guess that was my biggest inspiration behind creating music production for women, just because I felt like if I can do it, I really want to show other women that it's definitely possible for them to, and to not worry about the stereotypes that have been around for a long time.
So you teach music production for women?
Yes, so yeah, it's an online learning platform. It's an introductory course into Ableton and music production. We do some workshops around London and, you know, working on a podcast at the moment and a few other things. For women is in the title because I wanted it to be a place where it is majority women, but we are open to anyone that wants to join or be part of it.
Cool. Oh, that's what it stands for, MPW, Music Production for Women.
Exactly.
It makes sense.
You got it,
now.
Tom.
You're about to release an EP. Do you want to tell us more about that? You want to plug your EP?
Yeah, so my EP is called Ignorance. As you might have known from like my gigs or whatever, I don't really shy away from talking about things that mean a lot to me, which could be a bit controversial. So all the tracks are quite a strong message, you know. So it's a collection of songs that have been around for about 2 years and that I've been performing for a long time. I just felt like it was now time to put it out, and this is one actually that I needed to really overcome that mental barrier of holding on to things for perfection. Really excited about it. It's something that came together when I kind of started producing, but I am quite proud of it and interested to see what people think.
Do you have an advice or something you want to say to all the creatives out there, whether they like, you know, making music or they paint stuff or they draw or stuff like that?
This is some advice that I'm going to give them, and something I need to take myself a lot as well, is like, don't forget why you do it. Don't forget that you're doing it because it's fun and because it makes you happy and because you love it, because so many times we can get caught up with looking out, seeing what other people are doing, comparing, and then just feeling really bad about what we're doing. But at the end of the day, like, art is art. It doesn't need 1 million followers for it to still be a piece of art, you know. Just remember the joy you get from it and do it for that reason and that reason only.
Thanks for being a part of this.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, I love it. I enjoy talking to other creators. You're someone I can relate to, so I like having these conversations. And it's great being here, great being at Innovations. Although it's a little bit loud at the moment, so I think we should probably stop now.
Yeah, wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Cool, thank you. Thanks so much.